he goes live. You're listening to the Studio PTBO podcast, where we talk all things marketing to help you build and grow your business online. Welcome to the latest episode. The Studio PTBO podcast. We are back, and we are back with another guest. We had a little bit of technical difficulties with this new system, but we're here. We're live on the Studio PTBO page. If you're joining us from the Studio PTBO Marketing Hacks, wherever you're joining from us, thank you for tuning in to the Studio PTBO podcast once again. Neil, my man, I'm going to say it one more time. You must be in a good mood. You're wearing plaid.
I am. It's a plaid-tastic day here in beautiful Peterborough, Canada. And you know what, Cody? We learn shit happens. We're learning this wonderful new platform. And it's, stuff happens. And our guest today is very patient about that. And we appreciate that. And being a serial entrepreneur, he would know what that's like to have to juggle a lot and technical stuff and back-end stuff. So Frank Sinopoli, welcome to the show today. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
So Frank, I first heard of Frank last week when I read a CBC story on him. His new company is called Grocery Neighbor, and it's like a giant supermarket on wheels. And it's just pretty novel concept, man. Like it's funny. It almost made me think of back, like I'm going to age myself here, but back when I was a kid in the 70s, getting milk delivered to my house. And there's something really comfort food about it. And, and then it delivers to your house. You kind of get excited about it coming. And it's like you hear this horn ringing. And sort of, Frank, walk us through, like, how the heck did you come up with this idea? And was it already in the works before this pandemic was happening? Did it get accelerated now? Give us a little bit of the backstory of this.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. There is that level of experience that comes with it. The ice cream truck, the milkman, all of that stuff certainly inspired this. But the main inspiration was COVID, having the social distancing, et cetera, being a real factor now. This concept was in my brain shortly before. However, it became reality when I had learned that my family in Italy had gone on lockdown, because they had went on lockdown before all we did. So you just knew that it was coming, and we really wanted to come up with a solution that would, I guess, bode well with what's happening.
Now, Frank, to say that you're a serial entrepreneur, I think is an understatement. We chatted, we just met today, and we chatted prior to hopping on this live, and you kind of took us through a little bit of your backstory. And I would love for you to share your backstory and how you got into entrepreneurship. And was it nature? Was it nurture? Like, what exactly, drove you to become an entrepreneur? Maybe walk us through your backstory and how you got to, Grocery Neighbor today.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So I'm pretty cliche. I started Jane and Finch. So, having that, let's call it, ghetto background. Now, by no means did I have, a dirty old and poor upbringing or any of that nature. My parents did, the best that they could to provide. I had a great childhood. We had great things, but we were Jane and Finch. My first real, meeting with entrepreneurship was when I was 12 years old. I remember walking into a discount store with my mother, and there was this purple box of chocolates there that had individually wrapped chocolates in it. They were selling it for $1. At the age of 12, I just understood that it could be sold for more. So I had convinced my mom to buy all of them. I then had neighborhood kids sell them door to door for me for $3. So I would take $1, give it to the salesman, put $1 aside for my creditor, who was my mother at the time, and I put $1 in my own pocket. I remember being in a park with $100, feeling incredibly powerful. All my friends had Reebok pumps. I had Franklin pumps. They had Nikes. I had Psyches. So I took that $100 and I went out and I bought my first pair of Nike shoes, and they lasted forever. And that was just my first run-in with being an entrepreneur. later on, I ended up founding Ranger Moving Systems with a partner, where we basically went to the board of directors of United Van Lines and Mayflower to become a Mayflower agent. And we were, in fact, awarded that agency and becoming the first standalone Mayflower company in Canada. Built that company up, and then in 2011, I was lucky to exit that business, and because I was actually starting my first tech company. So while I was selling the transportation company, I was starting my first .com. Everybody was in .com. It seemed like the great place to be. I thought, hey, that's where I want to be. I had an idea that most people thought was great, but at the time didn't really understand intuitive behavior, what was, UX, UI, or any of these things. So, we launched the concept that everyone loved, trended worldwide on Twitter, 438,000 some odd registered users in days back in 2011. Wow. Servers crashing, and then people got to the website and went, well, how do I use this? So I had a group of very intelligent, smart people come along and say, we're going to take this database off of you because you don't know what the heck you're doing with it. And I looked at them and I said, you're right. This is my first kind of stint. And I took a little time to go and do a little bit of more diligence in the tech space before I wanted to take my next kick at it, which was going to be let's call it a membership discount card called the Social Parlor that my business partner, Matt, and I launched on Mother's Day. On that exact same day, we were featured in the Toronto Star, and then I conceptualized the idea of a digital coupon. And I'm not joking, the word came to me first, coop gone, as in paper coupons are gone. And I called my business partner. I said, coop gone. And he goes, what the heck are you talking about? I said, it's our next business. And he said, we just launched the Social Parlor today. And I said, I know. I think I'm ready to move forward. I've got something good. Come over as soon as you can. Now, he was golfing with his mother at the time. It was Mother's Day. By the time he got to my apartment, I had the theater room covered in giant Post-it notes, and it was the digital coupon business model. And he looked at it and went, this is crazy. I'm in. And that was the beginning of KoopCon, where we then went on a tangent. We went and raised capital 4 different times, but a total of upwards of close to 11.5 million. Wow. At the end of everything. And crazy.
You move fast, eh? I feel like it seems like when you have instincts about something, you go all in.
I'll tell you what happened when I was a kid. I was working at Beaver gas station. So I was running a gas station when I was 16, and I was held up at gunpoint twice there, which my mom actually found out via the news. I never told her because I didn't want to lose my job. So she found out in the news. But when I was there, I had conceptualized the idea of a pump spray squeegee, because people would pull into the gas station all the time just to get their windows cleaned. So I thought, pump spray squeegee, brilliant. Looked into the whole concept, and I had no intelligence back then, so I thought you had to patent it right away. So I looked into what it would cost to patent it and all this, and it just was way out of my wheelhouse. A year later, somebody created it. I think they pulled in like 14 million year one. At that moment, I told myself I was never, ever going to let an idea go, and I just chased them. And I believe that at the end of the day, you learn more from failure than success. So why not go out there and take a shot?
Are you telling me, Frank, that your mom saw you on City Pulse after being robbed at a gas station?
She read about it. She read about it in the paper that I had been held up at gunpoint.
You're gone.
I didn't want to tell her.
You were trying to recycle those newspapers that day before.
It was a funny story.
So tell us about, I know you gave us the backstory on, sort of having the lemonade stand as a kid. That's you sort of in your DNA, you're wired for this. Yeah. But how are you really self-taught? Did you ever go to business school, or have you always sort of just figured this stuff out on your own and built your tribe, so to speak, a network of like-minded people who can get shit done for you?
Yeah, I've always believed in being the dumbest guy in the room. I think that there's real logic to being if you want to be the smartest guy in the room, you got to spend years being the dumbest guy in the room. So I always tried to surround myself with people that were smarter than me, people that would challenge me, because I always found that when I had the yes men, I always seemed to fail. So, I wanted to be challenged. I always wanted to have good mentors around me. From an educational standpoint, I've got a grade 12. My father passed away when I was 20, and everything changed for me, my perspective, and it was really time to grow up. And I decided, this was my turning point. So I don't have a post-secondary school, but I'm a big reader in terms of, and I don't mean I read novels. I mean, knowledge. I just want data, information. I'm very data driven. So I'm constantly in the know. And then I learn by trial and error. I have no problem failing. I don't care. I'll fail.
It's so unique. We've had so many entrepreneurs and business owners on our podcast over the last, year, and like they echo that sentiment of like, try to be the dumbest person in the room. Like, I'm a huge proponent of that. I'm a huge proponent of like, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So the fact that you echo that sentiment is like absolutely phenomenal. Frank, I'm really curious to know when it comes to like what entrepreneurs and business owners can do. I know that you do a little bit of sales coaching, you mentioned, and that's kind of what you're doing now prior to, launching the Grocery Neighbor. And I'm just curious, like, what advice do you have to business owners that are unsure of how to actually create a sales process, and maybe walk us through what you do in regards to, mentoring and business consulting? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think in sales, there's this misconception that you've got to be a really, really good talker. And obviously you do have to be a good talker. The gift of the gab is very key. But what I've learned, along the way is being a good listener more than anything. A real salesman is going to do an assessment of questions. You got to look at it like a doctor, right? Doctors, you won't walk into a doctor's office and the doctor just says immediately what's wrong with you. They ask you a series of questions so that they can provide a solution for you. In sales, I think it's very key to do an assessment and ask real important questions, and then layer those questions continually so that the person you're engaging feels that first and foremost that you care, you're listening, but more importantly, if you're listening and asking the right questions, people are telling you how to sell them, right? So by asking the right questions and layering those questions, what you're doing is you're putting people in a position to give you the ammunition to then use back at them at the end when you're trying to close them. So if you ask a bunch of questions in the beginning, you can then bring that up in the end to kind of close the deal. So I think a lot of misconception in sales is the lack of listening, which was me. I'm a talker. It was very hard for me to shut my mouth. I'm learning.
You're like us.
Yeah, no, we're squirrels. But yeah, what you're saying is never assume. Like,
don't assume.
Yeah, don't assume. Ask questions. Listen, take notes, take mental notes, which is then sort of building a case for how you're going to position and sell their product properly. I want to dive into Grocery Neighbor because, again, I think it's a completely novel concept. How are you beta testing that? Because it's like giant trucks I'm envisioning driving down residential streets. Can I literally like have an app that I can order from and then get in your truck and pick what I want? Or how's this going to work?
Yeah, so you'll be notified when the truck is in your neighborhood, and then you can register to be notified as it gets even closer. But the idea is to dedicate a unit to a neighborhood so that that neighborhood becomes quite familiar with that unit. It becomes their grocery neighbor. But also it evolves to have exactly what that neighborhood wants, right? Because you might have a neighborhood in Barrie that would be served completely different than a neighborhood in Brampton. So the idea is that the units themselves will be dedicated to a neighborhood. You'll enter through the rear, pass through it, and exit through the front. So I like to look at it as like circuit shopping. Circuit training?
Yep.
It's one route to finish everything. We've done the same thing here with shopping. And then in terms of it storming through neighborhoods and like that, they're designated to neighborhoods. So we're not going to be just ripping through neighborhoods. We'll have partnerships with the neighborhoods. And that's why right now people can go on to the website and vote to have a unit dedicated to their neighborhood. We are bombarded right now with postal codes. It's like we thought launching 3 units made sense. Now we have capacity to launch a significant higher amount. But again, scaling is also an art. So we got to be very careful.
Yeah. And walk us through the scaling part of what you're doing here. I mean, you literally need a fleet of trucks. If you want to take this across Canada at some point, which I think it mentioned in the CBC article, you're trying it out in Toronto, but how do you scale the fleets? How do you find the drivers? How do you source local produce? Is that all stuff you're going through with your team right now in terms of how that would work?
So funny enough, I spent months trying to get all of that together when what I really should have done is just launched a CBC article, because now it's all coming to me. So what ended up happening is every vendor out there, every provider, investors, everybody and anybody who has anything to do with this business or thinks that they can make money off of it or benefit from it in any way has reached out. So it's all coming together fast. And what I have now is a pile of pieces that form an incredible business puzzle. So it's very exciting right now, putting it all together. Scaling it really is about collecting data intelligently and then managing that properly, surveying the people to make sure we're serving them correctly. But I would say most of this is data collection and logistics.
It's crazy what PR can do for a business, can do for an entrepreneur. Like, you know, we've been chatting a lot about that over the last little while, about, you know, getting featured on, you know, articles and podcasts, and doing different things like, you know, getting on this podcast or getting on like the CBC, and how much the media can play into essentially the growth of a business. So I'm curious, was that like a strategy that you had, or like with other businesses as well? Like, did you have a PR strategy, and if so, what was it?
So I have a buddy of mine who thinks I'm absolutely crazy, but seems to think that in a brilliant way that seems to work. I said to him, I'm missing a few key things, but I don't know what. I really couldn't figure out what I was missing. I know that like the business was coming together too easily, but I was missing something. So I said to him, if I can make a lot of noise, the pieces will fall in. There's no way that I won't be able to figure out what I'm missing. And honestly, like Diane wrote that article, and then suddenly, I mean, CP24 Breakfast did it like a 6-minute segment. I had no idea. My cousin said, hey, I really liked that segment this morning. And I said, what are you talking about? He sent it to me. I wasn't involved. They just were talking about it.
Who did they interview? Oh, they were just talking about it on air.
They were just talking about it on air. They posted the picture, and then 3 of them were talking about what a great idea it was, and then they were joking about what kind of jingle it should have. So to your point, like, yeah, I mean, the publicity in the press, the free PR is tremendously advantageous, and it's really made this come to life because now I have all the pieces I needed, but in multiples. So it's not like, okay, I've got one vendor option for this unit. I've got 20 now. It's crazy.
Well, and what was the biggest revelation that came out of that? I almost feel like it became like a focus group, like who does, because you don't always know your market. You think you know it, but sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. Now, my assumption would be baby boomers, but I could be wrong, that this is a gold mine. They don't want to go out. They just want to come to their house. They want that convenience. They're already in that mode anyway right now. So what were the biggest surprises that came out of this article, the revelations?
So you were right. I was thinking that exact same thing. I was also thinking, okay, you've got these families, got kids. Like I've got kids, and dragging my kids to the grocery store to pick up just steaks because we just want a protein we've got everything else in the house becomes a real challenge. What I found was we were being inundated by the elderly. Seniors are coming out, and I mean hundreds of thousands. Like it's insane. And they're explaining their day-to-day life on what it takes for them to get groceries and the challenges. So they're coming together in large numbers saying this would be hugely advantageous. I'm getting pictures from people with disabilities of them on a bus covered in groceries going, I have to walk 20 minutes. I can barely walk as it is. And now I got to lug this. Families, I got one lady who sent me a picture of her kid in the doorway laying down. It's her trying to drag the kid through the doorway. So I think the 2 big communities that came screaming were the disability and the elderly. The other ones I expected, but for some reason, I'm not sure why I didn't hone in on the elderly community as much as it's now honing in on me. And now we are focused really on helping that community, because when you think about it, they deal with a lot. They get onto these buses that they packed up. They have to go a certain day, and then they have to carry these things a certain distance. It's incredibly sad to watch.
Totally. And how are you then marketing? Like some people are describing it almost as a farmer's market on wheels too. Like, are you trying to give it that kind of real comfort food, nostalgia, 50s feel? Like, are you sourcing? Is the plan to source really locally from? How does that work? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So at scale, it's tough. You know, when you're going at big scale, it is hard. However, we're doing our best to source as much local as possible. And I will, remain focused on providing local fresh, because I do think that matters. I think it matters to the buyer. I think it matters to the seller. And it matters to me. But we do want to give that farmer's market feel. I think everybody really appreciates the produce and the meats at a farmer's market. Yeah. We want to deliver that same feel, but because we can do it at scale, maybe you won't have the price shock that you would at a, farmer's market.
So maybe take us through the process of like how this actually works, like how like, and maybe you don't have the process worked out quite yet, but if you do, what is the process for the consumer to essentially take advantage of this service that you're offering?
Perfect. So right now what we're doing is we're just collecting the data to aggregate all the communities to be able to determine whether or not a unit there's enough buyers, let's say it, to fulfill the unit. Once that happens, then that unit is dedicated to the neighborhood. The neighborhood then receives notifications whenever it's in the neighborhood, or they can simply trace it. So they can go online and track where the vehicle is. When the unit is near their home and they're ready, basically they enter through the rear. It's called a shelf raises from the side of the truck that you push. So it's like a buggy, but it's floating. So it pushes it, you put your stuff on, you get all your produce. The idea is we want you to be able to get a full meal. So your produces, your meats, your cheeses, like the dairies, the breads. And then the idea is there'll be QR codes along with really neat recipes that you can actually scan and go, hey, this looks delicious to you. Guess what? Everything is available here. So you just got to grab one of these, one of those, and one of these, and you're off. So the idea really is we want people to be able to get a full meal. A lot of us, it's 2:00 in the afternoon. We might even still have some stuff in the fridge, but we don't want that. We want something else, or we don't have that protein there. We don't want to go to the store. I love the idea of this truck rolling in and people being able to pick their fresh ingredients for their dinner that day.
And they don't have to necessarily pre-plan it. Can they literally get it if the truck's rolling onto the street to deliver to someone else? I can go to the truck too if it's rolling up.
Absolutely. We're not making people pre-buy. We're going to be having programs where people will have the option to pre-purchase. But what that does is we create volume buying power within the neighborhoods. So, hey, if X amount of people buy this particular product, the price is going to drop. So there'll be cool promotions that they'll be able to work for collaboratively on, but you will be able to just go and shop. Just treat it like a store, just a grocery store that happens to be in front of your house.
What I find the most incredible thing about the process is what you said. You said there's going to be an app that they can actually track and see where the actual truck is in their neighborhood. Is that
yes, there's an app, but it's also mobile because I don't believe in making people download an app. I will have an app, but you will also be able to do everything via the web as well.
Web app, which is incredible because sure, you're providing a service, but you're also selling time, very similar to what Uber is doing, which is absolutely incredible. And, for any entrepreneur out there listening to this podcast, Frank has really identified a pain point that is actually in the industry, and he's providing a solution, and he's selling time, which is it blows my mind that you thought about this concept and this idea. So I'm curious, how do you come up with these ideas? There's a lot of people that want to get into entrepreneurship, or they start a business and they're unsure of how to actually maybe start another business and how to venture off, or if they're really struggling right now, specifically we're talking about what's happening in the world right now, they're unsure of how to reposition their offer either in the online space, or if they're in a industry like hospitality, they're unsure of how to actually go and create a new business.
Yep.
How do you come up with all these ideas as a serial entrepreneur, find voids in the marketplace? Is there a process that you go through, or maybe walk us through that?
Yeah, actually I do have a weird process. So cool. First of all, I do agree that time is the most precious thing on earth. So it's one of the things I always try and focus on when doing a business. If you can sell back time, you've got something. For me, my process has always been really weird in the sense that I always believe I can conceptualize an idea if I lock myself in a room and if I bring really odd objects. So what I do is I take different objects. So for example, I had invented this, it was called the heel pad. And what it was a pad that you step on, and it just had, it would look like this, but you stepped on it. And before you stepped on your shoe to remove your shoe, because we all do that, you step on your foot, right? Your heel to remove your shoe. You constantly are scraping the back of that shoe. So I invented this little piece of rubber that you step on first. So you don't have to change the way you take your shoe off, but it protects your shoe. The way I conceptualize that is I walk around my house, I bring a bunch of items into my think tank, and then I look at the item and I think of the different verticals that come with that item and what are the different opportunities. Or what I do is I take old industries and I think of how do you implement technology in an old industry to make it more efficient? Because I think that a lot of times you might have an industry that's using a technology let's say in this vertical, and they're doing great things with it. I'll use the QR code as an example. We had the QR code. Everyone thought the QR code was going to be the next great thing for marketing, and then it didn't go anywhere. I took the QR code and said, wait, if you scan this, we can actually validate the authenticity of a digital coupon. We can do it without integrating into a POS. Retailers are going to like that. That was our ticket into all the retailers when we launched the digital grocery coupon. So sometimes I just like to take industries, see what they're doing and go, is there anything in that industry that works over here?
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's what you're basically saying is you don't have to come up with something from scratch. Like
No.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And some of the best ideas ever are really just tweaking and refinements, right? They're seemingly subtle things that are game changers for a potential business. So I feel like that's sort of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and the key I think is really to try and break it before you try and make it. So ideas are a dime a dozen. Honestly, if you put me in a room, give me a problem, I'm confident I can come up with 10 different solutions for it. Can I execute them? Maybe. I think at the end of the day, execution is everything. So ideas are great, and coming up with them, I think, is actually easier than executing them. But one of the things that I practice now really is just try and break it. As soon as I get an idea, I go to everybody I know and I say, don't tell me why this is good.
Yeah.
I want you to do everything you can to discourage me to not go out and start this business. And if you can't convince me, if we can't break it, then let's invest the time in to make it.
Interesting.
So how do you break it?
Yeah.
Like, walk us through that. I think Cody was probably going to ask the same thing.
I was literally like, we were on the same wavelength. There's like,
Yeah.
how do you break this thing that you come up with?
Well, it's easy because I think as an entrepreneur, it's so easy for us to get fixated on why our ideas are so great. We love them. It's our baby. Our idea is the best, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
So the idea is to really get up on a board and start putting down, why won't this work? What are the things that would prevent this from working? Okay, what are the risks? Okay, what are the challenges? Okay, and if you can overcome all those things, then it just becomes a lot easier. I think a lot of people look at business or even life and they stare at a mountain and they go, oh my gosh, that's really daunting. That's a macro image. So it's really obviously like you're looking at everything at once. If you kind of take that down and you minimize it, sorry, not macro is wrong wording. If you take that down and you minimize and go, okay, I'm not going to look at the mountain. We all know we got to climb the mountain, but if I keep looking at the mountain, as you walk towards it, it gets bigger and bigger, right? It gets scarier. Yeah. I always believe in just take micro steps. So come up with a bunch of micro initiatives that you're going to get done today that get you closer to the mountain, so that by the time you kind of get up to the mountain, you're at the bottom of it facing it, you've already got all the equipment you need to climb it, but you never focused on climbing it. So today I'm just going to figure out, what equipment do I need to climb the mountain? I'm not worried about climbing the mountain. What equipment do I need to climb the mountain? If I can figure that out, I've accomplished something. It's very small, but now I have a list of things that I need at least. And it just makes things easier.
That's incredible.
Break it down.
Man, it's incredible because I think that we as entrepreneurs, can get caught up in the grand end goal and the end goal. And that's super important, I think, to think about vision and where you want to be at 10 years. But it's like you're always chasing that. And then it's like you go throughout your days and you never feel like you make any progress. So the fact that you said write 5 things down and accomplish them every day keeps coming up through multiple podcasts that we do with entrepreneurs. So I love that you have that sentiment and you're echoing a lot of what other entrepreneurs like. It's interesting. I forget who it was. Somebody said last week that success leaves clues. And it's interesting that, you're echoing a lot of that. How important is mindset to you? A lot of what we're going through right now in regards to uncertain economic times and just trying to figure out as an entrepreneur in order to come up with new innovative ideas, try to reposition our message. How important is mindset to be an entrepreneur?
It's everything, because the world is against you. You're absolutely alone and everybody thinks you're crazy. And if you don't have the strengths to ignore the noise and break through it, remember, there takes the level of delusion, to be successful. And, they say, I think it was Steve Jobs that said, it's the people that are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do. And that's what, at the end of the day, it's a mindset. It's really believing and having that belief in yourself and the people around you, but also believing that it can be done. Just because it hasn't been done or because somebody else failed at it, or even if somebody did it, doesn't mean that it can't be done better. So I think mindset is huge. I've always, when I was a kid, I wrote a book called The Power of Want. And I didn't release it because I was a nobody, like who I still am, don't get me wrong, but who's going to buy a book off of a kid called The Power of Want? But that's exactly what it was. I just believed that I wanted things so bad that subconsciously I believed that I can achieve them so strongly that there was just no doubt, no matter what I was going through. And that really pushed me through a lot of things. I mean, I've had a really, it was a really rough year, even this past year. It was the toughest year of my life for a lot of different reasons. And my mindset at the end is what brought me through it.
Do you still have that book, and do you ever reread it?
I do. I read a lot. I go back to it because it's really, a lot of the things still make the exact same sense to me. And it's all just basics information. You know, my mindset back then was, if you believe it, you'll achieve it. Not because just you believe it, achieve it. It's if you subconsciously constantly tell yourself that, you never stop believing it. Thus, you never stop focusing on it. I think it was Confucius or Ford. Those who say they can and those who say they can't are both right. Like, there's tremendous power in that, because the moment you say you can't, even if you're announcing to the world, oh, I really think I can, that inner doubt, that's subconscious. It's stopping you from moving forward. Whereas me, it's like, I'll wake up at 2:30 in the morning because I had an idea, and then I'll be up till 5 because I just realize that I'm the only way that idea is going to come to life.
How do you think entrepreneurs can go about getting those breakthroughs in life? Like, do you think it's something that can be trained, or, you mentioned that you read a lot of books and you seek knowledge. What can entrepreneurs do in order to try, like, if you are in I know that like every entrepreneur we talk to says like mindset is key. Are there any key practices that you implement in your own life to kind of fix your mindset? Because I firmly believe, and I know that Neil will echo this, that like you said, mindset is everything. And I think mindset at the end of the day is a requirement in order to see success in your business and your life. What processes or what systems have you implemented in your own life in order that you might be able to give to an entrepreneur listening to this podcast?
First and foremost, I think self-care. I think for me, I was doing okay as a fat guy, as an overweight person. But the moment I started caring about myself a little bit more and taking care of my health, I just had more energy. My ability to close deals was stronger because everything just so much more passion. There was so much more life to me because I felt better about myself. I was more confident. So I think self-love is key, is taking care of yourself and waking up early. And really, I at the end of the day, doing a ton of reading and surrounding yourself with the right people, because inspiration, and passion and all these things, they're infectious. So to sit around and thinking that, you're going to be inspired alone, it's great. And a lot of us can do that, but, watch Steve Jobs movie, watch one of these, these founder movies that are really inspirational, or go to YouTube and just listen to, Jeff Bezos, or I'm just using examples, but any successful entrepreneur that you respect. I mean, I would encourage you to go to your industry and find people that have succeeded in there and just reach out to people and ask people questions. A lot of entrepreneurs have ego. So remember, if you reach out to somebody who you think is unreachable, play the ego, and don't ask for money. Don't ask for anything.
Jab, 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 hook. Yeah.
Jab, 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 hook. Gary V. And it's true, right? At the end of the day, but people want to share their knowledge because they feel good about other people feeling like they're adding value. So if you reach out to somebody that you respect and ask them a question that isn't asking them to give you something or contribute, that's just saying, hey, I actually care about your opinion, you might be surprised how many people would respond, and you'd find a lot of help and inspiration.
Yeah, I agree. And at the end of the day, we all share the same ethos and sensibility. Entrepreneurs, we're all wired the same way, and we all want to help each other and share nuggets. What is your North Star then with this company? Is it to scale it across Canada? And then what does that look like when you reach the mountain? Do you then move on to another company? Because you are a serial entrepreneur. It seems like you're going to come up with other ideas. I mean, you're young. You've got many decades ahead of you. So what is your North Star or North Stars?
So one of the things I learned as an entrepreneur is companies are not sold, they're bought. And what I mean by that is going into a venture with the idea that I'm going to exit in 5 years, it goes back to those who say they can and those who say they can't. You start developing that mindset. So the mindset is exit, 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 rather than build, 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 profitability, profitability. Yeah. So the goal really for me is just to build a very profitable, successful business that people love, that's actually serving communities, that's actually solving a problem. What happens after that, who knows? But, I do believe that if you focus on building a profitable business, if you are somebody that is looking to be acquired, then that's a better strategy than just building to be acquired. Now, that being said, it's always nice to look at the big guys, what they're doing, the direction they're heading, because they move like this. They're not as nimble. If you can position yourself to be where you think they're going to land, suddenly you're a gatekeeper. Now they're, leasing, they're buying whatever it is that you need. So there are different strategies, I think, that entrepreneurs can take for an end goal. But for this one, guys, honestly, I just really love it. I'm passionate about it. I just want to see where it goes. I want to build it.
Yeah, I can tell. And I know we have to wrap up shortly, Cody, but I want to ask you about, you park social media handles. What do you envision your social media game will be like? And how do you envision consumers using it? Because I can tell you that I believe it's going to explode on social, like that truck pulling onto a street, on Facebook, Instagram stories, TikToks from kids.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have in your imagination there, or strategy?
So I've picked up all the handles because now we've got a ridiculous amount of emails and postal codes that we can now create campaigns to try and port those people over to our social channels to create that big marketing power network, but also to start serving them better. Just to your point, we can do a lot of really fun campaigns with this thing. I mean, you picture that truck pulling in with a really cool jingle. You picture him getting out and he's got the white cap. Remember the white outfit, just like, the milkman had. There's so much you can do here. This is really experiential. I mean, we're not talking about just grocery shopping. We're talking about getting on state-of-the-art technology in an old-fashioned way that's delivering an experience that I think is going to give people goosebumps. And I really, really believe that.
Yeah. And sorry, Cody.
Do you feel like that this whole thing that's happening in the world right now, the COVID thing, has kind of expedited a lot of these ideas and these experiences? Because again, like what you're talking about, ideally has a little bit of AI to it, in the sense that, like, with the phone and the app and everything. Do you feel like it's because of this, it's expedited that the reactivity to the market to receive something like this? Absolutely.
I think that, I firmly believe that this service is valuable beyond COVID because, again, like we mentioned, time is the most precious thing on earth. If you don't have to drive to the store because there's one on your driveway, there's something to be said about that. So post-COVID, I do see value here, but I think COVID really made people go, these are the types of innovations that we need right now. These are the types of things that are going to force social distancing, because you'll never rub elbows with somebody on this unit. It's one lane. They're behind you. They might be in front of you, but you're not rubbing elbows. So I really do think COVID really helped this, but I believe that beyond COVID, there's true value here.
Yeah, I agree. And just to get really into the weeds here, finally, do you even think about, in terms of the experiential experience, the driver, it's the same driver that pulls in? Because I feel like, for me, if I see Joe or Nancy pull up every week, that you're building that rapport too, right?
That's absolutely part of the experience. You need to know the driver. So the drivers are going to be dedicated to those units and to those neighborhoods, because there is a relationship that will be established. We want the camaraderie. People are around the truck, they're talking, they're having fun. He's out there manning the back. Then there's the cashier in the front. So the driver's role is beyond just driving. Every time they're stationed, they play a role at the back. So they really are involved. And I really do think that there will be friendships established in these neighborhoods, without a doubt.
Frank, man, so much valuable insight. Anyone that's listening back to the replay, if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, Facebook, wherever you're listening to this, go back. There's so many golden nuggets that we're taught. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you're going to want to listen to this podcast back again and again and again, because so many key core concepts that can be gleaned really in any industry. So, Frank, I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about what you're doing and just provide our audience so much value. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for your time and for having me. I appreciate it as well.
Awesome. And thank you for tuning into the StudioPTBO podcast. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner that is looking to grow and scale your business in the online space, we have a StudioPTBO Marketing Hacks group. It's a free online Facebook group that essentially helps business owners We go live weekly, do fireside chats inside of that Facebook group, just try to contextualize marketing advice for you for free. And we're really just trying to provide massive value back to the business community. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Frank, for joining us on the Studio PTBO podcast. We will see you soon.